Welcome back to the McCoy Leadership Podcast, elevating your impact through valuable insights and conversations about leadership. Welcome back to another episode of the McCoy Leadership Podcast. Today, we have Dr. Travis with us. He is the developer of Trust Ed, which is a framework for school improvement focused on developing trusted leaders. Just think about that, all of the leadership folks out there. We're going to talk about maybe some ways that we can instill better leadership into our students. And Dr. Travis has an amazing resume of things, but I found out most importantly, he is from Pennsylvania, which, as we all know, all good things come from Pennsylvania. At least that's what I think. At any rate, Dr. Travis, it is great to have you here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how in the world did you end up being involved in education and trust and leadership?
Oh, wow. That's, well, thank you. First of all, I was very, very happy to be here. And yes, grew up in Pennsylvania and still have a lot of family in PA. And that's home. I grew up in the northeast part of the state, up above Scranton, a little town called Montrose. And just, that's home. But have not resided there for many decades. And, long and varied career over the years, one that eventually led me into international education. I was working for an international school in Quito, Ecuador, when I was encouraged to pursue an admin path. I was a teacher in the high school there. And as I came into administration, I just saw all these issues between faculty and admin. And really what I saw was just trust did not exist. And a lot of the issues that were going on is just because people didn't trust each other. And at the same time, a friend of mine, David Horsager, wrote a bestseller on the Wall Street Journal, went #1, called The Trust Edge. You may have come across Dave Horsager, the Trust Edge Leadership Institute out of Minneapolis. Well, Dave and I have been friends for many years, and long story short is I got an opportunity Dave came to Ecuador, came to Quito, spoke, did a great professional development for our staff. But even while it was going on, I realized this is great stuff, but it's not connecting directly to what we do as schools. The principles, fairly universal, but struggle to connect with, okay, but what does that mean for a school administrator? What do we need to do differently? I ended up actually sitting in a training that Dave was doing for corporate 100 or corporate 500 people, folks up in Minneapolis. And as I sat there, and you've got, these major corporations represented around the room, and I saw the investment they were putting into using trust-based research to improve the quality of their program. Like, schools need this, schools need this. And that's really was the springboard to my doctoral program, and was, okay, we've got to figure out, there had been lots of research on the impact of trusted leadership in the corporate sector, but not well applied, or not applied in a deep way within the education sector. And so my work over the years now has been, okay, what are the key elements of trusted leadership? How do we assess it? How do we protect it? How do we build it? How do we repair it? And then how do we use that data on the assessment of our trust levels to actually design school improvement plans through the development of leadership? And it was like going on and on, but you asked the question, and it's kind of a big answer, but what I've found over the years in my own experience of the schools that I've worked with is if you get the trust piece right, you build those trusted relationships between the administration and the teachers and with the parents and the kids. It's like magic. It's like all kinds of good things just start happening. You get higher levels of engagement and achievement and volunteerism. But if you don't take the time to invest in intentionally ensuring high levels of trust, it doesn't seem to matter what the initiative is, it's going to fail. It doesn't work. In fact, that's a stat that I talk about a lot. 70% of improvement initiatives, and this is true in the corporate sector as well as in the education sector, 70% of improvement initiatives fail. And when you look at that stat and you look at, well, what's key to the 30% that are working, it's all about how they were implemented, those initiatives. And when you look, okay, what was it about the implementation? Ownership, right? So leaders, owners, they owned the initiative, they were invested in it. And there was a high level of trust between those implementing the initiative and those leading the initiative.
So, interestingly, I think just a couple of things went through my mind. One, I think it's important to point out that, and you hit on it, any of the things that we're about to talk about can work in your business, your home, and your school, because I think they're all, and I jokingly have said many times, I really wish they would let a business executive like me go in and run a school for a while and be able to show some of those things. But at the same time, I want to ask you a tough question. At least I think it's a tough question. We often hear things like, and I'm going to try to parlay this into both business and schools, but if I go into a business and they ask me to come help them, and I get there and the CEO says, I just feel like anything I do, I get run over. The employees are running over me. I identify it in my mind and say, okay, I think there's a trust issue here, and we need to start to work through that. And maybe there's a communication issue. Maybe, there's different pieces of that. We hear in the schools sometimes from teachers and administrators, as well as it I think is sometimes very obvious, parents today compared to parents 30 years ago, when the student, we'll just use an example, as a student gets in trouble and the principal has to call the parent, and the parent's first question today is, well, who caused them to do that? Not how do we solve this? And my question is, do you think that is a result of a lack of trust within the system, or do you think it's just a generational thing and we have to learn how to deal with it?
Well, my opinion is, right, so this is not necessarily based on research. It's all of the above, right? You've got cultural elements that have shifted tremendously. You've got wide scale failure of programs and policies, and people are weary of, oh, we're trying to fix this through another policy, right? And those kind of initiatives. You also have a mindset. What's education about? Is it really about outcomes, or is it about the experience? Those are two very different things. And if you look at the model of education over the centuries and what has worked well and what has, and you have to define well, right? What is a successful educational experience? Well, is it about the experience? Or is it, no, we got X number of kids into college or X number of AP test scores? That's another element where you've got to go back to kind of the philosophy and the root. But culturally, parent involvement and how parents approach the school today, it's a consumer mindset, right? It's not a partnership of raising our children. It's, either I'm paying my taxes or I'm paying my tuition for you to do this service. And that's really not what education is about, right? In its best form, education is a form of apprenticeship, right? In its best form, it's remodeling how to walk through life. I have a friend who's a theologian, but he talks about biblical wisdom. And if you look at apparently the Hebrew, and I'm not a language expert, but he was showing me the one, he says it actually means skilled living. What is wisdom? It's how to live life with skill. And this is really what quality teaching and quality education should be about. But it's been so systematized and so regulated that it's all about the outcomes rather than the experience of the child. And that's only just one element of what's going on. We've seen such a reduction in the quality of the teacher workforce, and that is not a criticism of the people in the school systems. Thank you for being there. You're amazing. Keep at it. Keep growing. But we're not attracting the top of the crop. right? And we're graduating fewer and fewer students from education programs or graduate programs, and so our pool is getting smaller and smaller of quality, passionate educators, and that's another piece of this, and we need experts in education. You made the comment about business. I wish we could, but business execs in schools. That's actually been tried. There's been a number of studies around that, and what they found is unless the business executive took the time and energy to basically retool his skill set, he needs or she needs to become an expert in curriculum, instruction, assessment, and learning environment. If they're willing to do that and become retooling, get that expertise, that competency in the nuts and bolts of a school, yes, they actually do have a great skill set. But if they come in thinking, hey, this worked at Microsoft, or hey, this worked at my manufacturing plant, no, it's not the same. And what we find is those leaders, they don't have the competency of what it means to be an educator. It doesn't work. It doesn't transfer. And that's why, again, that's what really propelled me into my work and research is like, okay, what does this look like for educators and specifically educational leaders? What are the specific things we need to be doing to ensure there are high levels of trust? And so that was the kind of the motivation behind that.
And it just hit me, some listeners might be thinking, why is Amos spending time talking about education and leadership in education? And I think it's important to draw the line there or connect the dots rather, that I think this is so important because in 13 years, we're going to be hiring the students that are going into kindergarten right now.
Right.
And I think it's great insight. And yes, there are great things we're going to gain out of this conversation just about trust and leadership, but I also think it's great insight into what's happening and how we can get involved. And ultimately, if we want to grow our own organizations and grow leadership in our communities, we have to somehow get behind something, get involved, and understand what's happening around us. So I just wanted to kind of connect the dots for everybody. So before, anybody's like, why are we talking about education? It's an important piece of our organizations going forward. But as a piece of that, I said it's a 13-year process. With that, and you talked about what is success. Now, me, as a business person, my idea of success for the school system is that we are putting people either into college or into the workforce. And if they're going into college, they're going to successfully complete that and go to work, and they're paying taxes. In my mind, they get a good job, a sustaining job, and they have a family and they live that American dream and they're paying taxes. That is success in my mind. And I don't know if there's a way to measure how quickly they go to work. And what I mean is, going to work when you're 35 is probably not success. Going to work when you're 18 or 24 or 26, if you went, for more education, that seems like success to me. Am I oversimplifying that?
I maybe a little, because I think it's more nuanced than that. It's certainly an element of success, and I don't think there is a single definition of what a successful school system or program is producing. Yes, you want students to be successful in whatever their path is. Here at the Academy, we're very focused on every student here has an individual learning plan. That means we don't just have a box of curriculum that we push kids through. It's, no, what are your aspirations? What are your passions? What are your dreams? And we build a pathway through high school, for them to pursue that. So I fully agree with you there. But there's also the human element of it, right? We want these to be trustworthy people. We want them to be individuals of integrity. We want them to be, truthful. We want them to be globally minded, right? You also have to think about, okay, there are values to be instilled here, and that's sometimes even more critical. That we've got students that are contributing to humanity by being better humans, and I know that's squishy, right? It's like that's not as easy as check the box. They got into the university of their choice. Yeah, that is a measure of success. But I want to know that young man, that young woman got into that university of their choice, and they are going to be just such an addition to that student body or to that workforce because of the quality of the individual. And that's a little harder to measure. Again, it's part of the experience rather than the outcome, but I think has to be integrated into all that we're doing. When we're talking about whether it's there's so many conversations going on. I'm sure you're well aware about just we need to almost kind of redesign the education system. I don't disagree with that. There are many faults with what we've got going on, but if we don't have a core conversation and understanding of this is about developing quality young men and women, then we're missing the point. It's not just about filling absence or what's the word when you've got positions to fill. It's not just about putting bodies into the workforce. It's about what do we want the future to look like as a nation, as a world. It's really about the quality of what we're producing of people. Does that make sense?
It makes absolute sense. And I think as well, I mean, in my mind going through that, I think you clarified that much better. Not only do we want them to go to work and pay taxes, we want them to have the values. And I guess really, back to leaders that are listening of businesses, this is going to be what we get. And I think we all would like to have employed by us at some point in time individuals that have great values, have learned skills. And I kind of think you said, we might need to rework it. Thomas Jefferson's idea of school was there were two different paths, a homemaker and somebody that was going to go to work. The only thing we've really changed is we've maybe added another path of going to college, as that has become more of a thing. Now, on that note, you mentioned that, education at its best is apprenticeship. And I would agree with that. And I've been heavily involved over the years with different apprenticeship programs. And have we kind of, as businesses, what can we do to get more involved, I guess is the question, at your school? What can businesses do to get involved to help through that process, whether, I'm thinking of mentoring and apprenticeship type things. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think those are always great initiatives for business owners to look at. Is how can I partner with the local school? And there are models all over the place. Amos, I'm sure you're familiar with that. I know there's some in Pennsylvania as well, where there's like school within a school. I even think back to when I was in school all those years ago, right? But I remember my older brother, he was in classes like half the day. He was in BOCES, the second half of the day, learning a trade and a skill, and that served him tremendously in the years that followed. But what can business leaders do to help influence that? Yeah, figure, okay, where would it be helpful, and where could we invest in having a teenager also shadowing and walking around and just seeing this is what life in the work world looks like. That's great. And also, you're connecting the dots. Comment, the principles of trusted leadership are transferable. It's not just true to education or whatever the sector is. Again, that's been the area that I've worked in, and thus, my field and my book was all about how does this connect to the classroom. But the principles themselves of what does it mean to be a trusted leader, what competencies have to be there and in place, those are universal regardless of who the leader is and what they're leading.
Absolutely. And speaking of your book and your Trust Ed framework, can you tell us a little bit about that? How did you come up with a good framework? And then I think with what you just said, I want everybody to understand that you can still use that probably in your current organization if you're not education. But tell us a little bit about Trust Ed.
Well, again, it came out of the research, and I remember a defining moment. I had finished my dissertation, and it had been published, and it's this monster volume. You just put years of your life into it. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with my wife saying, okay, there's lots in here. How do I communicate this to others. And I'd already started to be invited to do training events and so forth. And I was looking for, how do you visualize this? Because I know most learners learn best visually. I mean, it's just again, it's part of our contemporary culture. We're visual learners. And so I was trying to find an image to wrap the research around. And it was my wife, and I love to give her credit because she was absolutely right. She goes, well, isn't it kind of like a bridge? You're trying to get from where you are to where you want to be, which is in trusted relationships and trusted product or trusted, results. But all these pieces have to be together. And I'm like, that's a great image. And I actually spent about the next 3 months reading everything I get my hands on about bridge construction. And so I learned about suspension bridges, and they need a foundation and a substructure and girders and on, right? And I'm like, this is brilliant. And so what I ended up doing then was just wrapping the research and the results around that verbiage. And thus the book is called Trust Ed, The Bridge to School Improvement. But then we look at the components of leadership as 6 different components of a bridge. And so for one example, the foundation of a bridge, the found is needed, right? Everything is built on it. Well, what does that look like in leadership? Well, it's beliefs and values. That's our foundation. And whether those are personal beliefs and values or beliefs and values of our organization or our company or our school, they need to be known. They need to be articulated, right? And there's elements within that are just vital. And if they're not there, you're not going to attract people that are going to share those beliefs and values. You're not going to be doing like Jim Collins, has his bus illustration. You're not going to be able to get the right people on the bus if you don't know where the bus is going, right? So, and then the substructure, and I won't go through the whole bridge, but the substructure, what is its function? It's connecting and supporting everything, all parts of the bridge, to the foundation. And this is the area, Amos, where I most frequently see that trust is breaking down in organizations. It's when leaders or owners or school administrators are saying, these are our beliefs, these are our values, but then their actions, their implementation is not in alignment with their beliefs and values. Trust falls apart. If you say, my employees, they're my highest value. I value them more than anything else as part of our organization. But you haven't been the passionate leader to ensure that their compensation levels are as high as possible, that their benefits packages aren't as competitive as possible. No, they're not going to believe you. It's like, no, you blah, blah, blah. Yeah, you think we're your most valuable asset to the company, but you're not really championing our cause and our care. No, you're not going to be trusted. And you see that again on the school side as well. So leaders have got to be authentic in connecting and supporting everything they do, the substructure of leadership, to their beliefs and values. And so the framework is basically we created a research-based assessment tool to look at those 6 components of trusted leadership and to identify, where are we? Because one of the challenges I'd seen over the years in trust work is not very solid assessment tools. And I'm a bit of a data geek. I'm like, I want to see the numbers. How do I know where I'm at in relationship to trust in my employees? And how do I know what to work on? Because there's so many, it's complex. So how do you focus an improvement plan if you don't have the numbers? And so that was a part of the framework was, okay, how do we assess trust? And then with that information, how do we drill in then to, okay, what specifically needs to change on Monday? And this is where we're seeing just the success of the program is, it's data driven. It makes the process faster. If you know what to work on, things get better faster. So there you go. That's the framework and where it came from and how it's being used.
So not only are you the author of the book, but you have put this to work in real life. Your current organization, you've had some transformation and some turnaround. Can you share a little bit about that? What were some of the amazing turnarounds that you saw by putting this to work?
Well, and it's not just about me. I appreciate, I wrote the book, but it's all about the team, right? It's all about the people that that are sharing the journey with you. So I'm at Houghton Academy. I'm very honored and proud to serve as the head of school here. The Academy is in its 141st year, a long tradition as a quality Christian college preparatory academy. We have a day program and a large international school boarding program for a small school. Clarify my term large. As an international boarding school, however, the 10 years prior to COVID, it got harder and harder to operate. COVID came, the school nearly closed its doors forever. And when the Board of Trustees reached out to me, the school was down to about 50 students and just barely surviving. And really, my work coming in was to spend the time assessing the needs. Initially just recruit a team that will be aligned with our values, our beliefs, our vision. Where are we going? What do we want? What do we believe about the academy, where it needs to be and where it needs to go, and try to bring in others to help support basically a revitalization of a great legacy. I mean, the school's just got a great legacy, and it nearly died. And what we have seen over the last 2.5 years now is a 135% increase in enrollment.
Wow.
In fact, our dorms are packed. We're currently renovating space to accommodate more international students, and we've got waiting lists going on. I mean, it's exciting, but I would say from my approach as the leader, though, it has been hire well, empower well. And it's like, no, get quality people in who are aligned with your mission, your values, your purpose, and then race to meet their needs. And yet within the reality of we're digging out of a financial hole here, right? That was dug over almost a 15-year period. There's lots to fix. But if people have a shared, again, I'm a big fan of Jim Collins, if they have a shared vision, they all know where they're going, and they're on the right seat of the bus, that bus is gonna run. And that's what we're experiencing here. And Amos, it's what I have seen, though, and I could tell you a number of stories of schools that I have the opportunity of consulting with or supporting or being employed at, where, again, you spend the time developing those trusted relationships with your team. You get a higher level of engagement. You get a higher level of innovation. Sometimes schools, organizations grow in ways we didn't expect, but in really good ways, because you've got people with aligned passion and vision. So again, I come back to it all the time with those that I mentor. It's like, you got to make sure you're working on the right problem. And so often we're not working on the right problem. The problem is the trust level. All right. The problem is relationship building, social, emotional, if you will, environment within the organization. And until that's fixed, you can do all the initiatives you want. They're not going to last. And on the school side, I've seen that with math initiatives and literacy initiatives, and I know of some very good ones, and I can support those. But if you don't have that trust level and that social emotional health of the faculty and staff with the administration, they're not going to get engaged, and it's not going to have the results that you would hope. Same thing is true in the corporate sector or the organizational world.
You remind me of a story. And I cannot remember the executive's name, but he was the executive of Alcoa at one point in time. And before his time with Alcoa, he had been working for the federal government back, I believe, in the 70s, and the infant death rate was rising in the United States. And they asked him to find out why. And so he studied, and he found out that young mothers, their bodies weren't ready to go through birth. And so they were having more issues and more defects, and infant death rate was rising. And so that wasn't enough for him. The government had only asked him to figure out why. They didn't ask him to fix it. But he kind of said, what's causing this? So he started going to high schools and saying, are you teaching teenage girls that they need to take care of their bodies, take vitamins, eat good food, so on and so forth? They said, well, no. He said, well, can you teach it? And they said, no, we don't feel comfortable teaching that. We weren't taught any of that. So then he went back to the colleges and said, hey, can you institute into your curriculum, some of this health stuff? Anyhow, long story short, through his efforts, he started to see the infant death rate come down, and it's still, I think, down from what it was at that point. I'm not 100% sure. Don't quote me on those facts. The point was, when he got to Alcoa, they were in terrible shape, and they wanted him to fix the profits. And on day one, when he got up in front of everybody and said, I'm your new CEO, first question was, how are you going to fix the profits? He said, I'm not. I'm going to fix our safety issue. And one thing led to another, and ultimately it ended up fixing the profits. But I think they're prime examples. You said you got to make sure you're working on the right problem and identify what it is.
Yeah, exactly. I want to follow up on your comment about the connection, though, between the colleges that are cranking out or the graduate schools that are cranking out the teachers who are investing in the students, who then end up right in the rest of the world. There's a great work being done by Tony Wagner. I don't know if you're familiar with that name. He wrote a book called Most Likely to Succeed. There's also a video or a film about that. I think that's available online. Your listeners can just Google that. But one of the things that Wagner identifies is so much of our current system of education, and I'm meaning that both, pre-K through 12 and higher ed, is all still grounded in a system that was developed in the industrial age of Carnegie and over 100 years ago, and it's still influencing what we're doing today, and it is not reflective of what will be most helpful to students and their future. One of the things that I talk about a lot with our faculty and staff as we're looking at our curriculum and our programs is we got to be careful and got to be sure that we are meeting the needs of students today for their future, not based on our past. And we know much of the employment for these kids doesn't even exist yet. The kind of jobs they're going to go into in another 6, 8, 10, 15 years, they don't even exist yet. So what we need to prepare them for are those skill sets of collaboration, critical thinking, independent learning. I mean, those are all skill sets that will serve them. But so much of the system is still based on, you've got to pass this test, this exam, possess this historical knowledge, and there is value, right, in a liberal arts education. I'm going to support that all day long too. But I think in the book he gives the example of calculus, right? It's like, okay, we see most universities will say, no, kids are going to have calculus as they're coming into university. But then when you survey how many of those college students who had to have high school calculus to enter college ended up actually using calculus in their career, and I can't quote the exact percentage, but as I recall, it was down to like 1-2%, right? It's like we've got a system that's forcing them through these certain disciplines that aren't actually feeding what they really need to be doing. And I'm not anti-calculus either, by the way. So we got to listen. Like, no, we need, there's absolutely a place for calculus, but we also need to be continually reflective of are we truly training up students for what they need? And that's a challenge.
So I agree 100%. And it kind of brings me to a secondary question. You have the Trust Ed framework, and all businesses, all organizations, education or not, are going through from time to time some sort of planning. They're thinking about, and I think you hit a very valid point. They should be thinking about the future and not letting the past dictate the future. But how do you see the role of leadership evolving in a world that is facing constant change and rapid change? And lastly, this system, will it be, and I understand we don't know what the future holds, but is it a system, or is this a set of laws that will be transferable into the future? And should we be revisiting this on a regular basis? So, kind of with all of the change that we know is coming at us, how do you see leadership evolving over time? And lastly, if you go through this process that you have laid out, are you done? You don't need to do it again? Or should you come back and look at it from time to time?
Well, that's a great question. So, like with the Trust Ed framework, what I do with schools and a few organizations that have adopted it for their settings as well. No, the assessment piece is set up to happen twice a year, ongoing. And in fact, what we know from just like survey data, how do you get to reliable survey data? And it's true of any assessment tool. It has to be done multiple times consistently, right? It's like, how do we know this is reliable data? Well, we adopt this tool of assessment, and then we come back to it, and we come back to it. I'm a big believer in short-term improvement goals, right? Okay, what's the data say? All right, what can we do with this information to get us to a better place in the next few months? In the school world, we often think semester-based improvement. I've been a part of board meetings where we do strategic planning for a few years, but it really has minimal value. There is value, and I think, no, we've got to have an idea of what the future is, but you really want to see meaningful change and influence and improve. It's got to be short term. And so what does leadership look like? I think it is focusing on those short term improvements and then supporting people well. And the best leaders are the ones who understand they are not the experts of everything, but they're great at supporting others. Again, back to Collins, his level 5 leader, right? The two key elements were passion and humility. And it's like, no, I'm passionate about what we're doing, but I also know I don't have to be the king of the mountain, right? It's like, no, I can support others and run with their success and encourage their success. But no, it has to be ongoing. You're never done until you're done. and no one can get comfortable. And we could tell all kinds. Think of Lee Iacocca, right? Or some of the classic stories, right? Wow, they were really doing great, and then they really weren't, right? It's like, there's never a time where you can get comfortable. It has to be ongoing. Assess, plan, act, reassess. Plan, act, reassess. And this is just what good leaders do. And the moment you get comfortable, that's when everything starts sliding backwards.
Imagine if Apple would have just stopped with the first iPhone and said, we did it, we're done. Where would we be today? So for the leaders and listeners that are out there listening and maybe facing a challenge right now, they're in a challenging time or a challenging situation, what would be your number one actionable step that they can take to get started today on leading down to a road of success?
They need to be vulnerable. And if there's a roadblock, Amos, that I've seen over the years where an organization just can't move forward, it is in those organizations where the leaders or the owners are not willing to be vulnerable. And what I mean by that is you've got to allow yourself to listen to others, including and especially your employees and those that you're managing and supervising. You've got to give them voice into what you're doing as a leader and as an organization. And until you're willing to do that, I've had organizations reach out to me, or I'd have an individual reach out to me and say, can you come in and help our school or organization? And I'm like, well, are you at the top of the chain? Basically, are you the decision maker? And they're, well, no. And I'm like, well, that's the person I need to talk to before we can move forward. That's the person or the group or the board, the owners, that they've got to be fully invested in understanding, right, for us to fix this, I need to be vulnerable to have my trust level assessed by my employees. They need to be able to say, yep, okay, let me have it. Where am I excelling and where do I need improvement? And until they're to a point of being vulnerable to receive that input and feedback, you're not going to see a pathway for improvement.
Yeah, but Dr. Travis, I hear what you're saying, but 30 years ago, I had the best year that anybody's ever had in the state of Pennsylvania. Can't I just stick with that? I'm sorry. I couldn't help.
2025. Yeah.
So as we're getting ready to come to a close, I want to make sure we do touch on how can people find out more about you, get the book, find out more about your framework?
Well, LinkedIn is usually the place where folks find me the quickest. So just Dr. Toby Travis, and you can find me there. I'm also a consultant with Global School Consulting Group. You can find me on their website. You just Google my name, you'll find me. The book's available on Amazon. Trust Ed, the Bridge to School Improvement. Thank you for allowing the plug.
Yes.
And that's, or again, at Houghton Academy is where I have the privilege of serving. And you come and visit us if you're ever in Western New York. It's a beautiful area. We have a lovely campus. We're a college preparatory school with a university. So, one of our distinctives is like our junior and seniors are actually in university classes. And it's a beautiful little college town here. So come and visit.
You know what? Maybe I will actually take you up on that. We come up each year, and it just hit me. Maybe I'll just take the show on the road, and maybe we can do an interview, a live interview in person.
Oh, that would be great.
So we end every episode with kind of a rapid fire section of 3 questions. I ask every guest the same 3 questions. And the first question, which you are probably, your expertise will fall right in line with this, but we like to ask all leadership experts because it's great to hear what people are seeing and hearing around in their realm. And that question is, if we could magically get all of the school administrators across the United States sitting in front of us, what would be your one piece of advice to them that would help them to be able to turn out better quality students at the end of their career?
Do everything possible to individualize the learning experience of the child. And I know it's hard, and I know it's expensive, but this is not a factory. These are people, and they're all unique, and they all have unique needs and unique aspirations. So be flexible with your structures, be flexible with your curriculum, be flexible with your pathways towards diplomas, and do everything possible to meet the individualized needs of students. And I think that would make a transformation of our system. Difficult, hard, because what is easy and cheap is the factory model, but it's not a human model.
Awesome. I love that answer. The second question is, what is your go-to book that over the years has guided you and helped to shape you?
Well, of course, I have to say the Bible first off, right? Just spiritual moorings is absolutely there. I've already mentioned some of my favorites, Jim Collins, David Horsager, Simon Sinek, Tony Wagner, Bob Marzano in the education world, great resources. And but those would be always at the top of the shelf. Is who am I directing others to read and look at? Would be those leaders.
Awesome. And the last question is, in today's ever-changing world of technology, what piece of technology do you find the most useful?
Oh, wow. That's a really great question. I'm not sure I have an answer. What piece of technology do I find the most useful? Well, certainly I have appreciated the iPhone in the convenience of calendar messaging and all of that. I've also learned the discipline of turning all the notifications off.
Yeah.
So that I'm using the tool, it's not using me.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Travis, thank you so much for joining us today. I think this was a great conversation. I think it will give great insight into not only some of the things we can do in our own organizations, but maybe some ways that we can all start to help to shape the educational system so that we are sure that we're getting quality out in 13 years. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And for our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to check out our past episodes. And don't forget to check us out on LinkedIn at McCoy Leadership and at McCoyLeadership.com on our website. Until next time, we appreciate you.